Hello everyone, my name is Art Russell. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to share some information from two books that I hope will help to empower you. The information is related to our true self, which I'm suggesting is consciousness or awareness, and the nature of our apparent reality. Before we get into the content, it's important to have an understanding of two words. The first is placebo, which means to please, and the second is nocebo, which means to harm. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the first term, placebo. It's commonly referred to as a sugar pill, but it can also take the form of a fake procedure. What's important to realize is that in either case of the placebo or the nocebo, the effects are created by the mind. So let's get into it. The first information comes through a book entitled The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. It relates an account that is connected to, at first, the placebo effect and later the nocebo effect. No incident better illustrates this, the placebo effect, than a now famous case reported by psychologist Bruno Kloffer. Kloffer was treating a man named Wright who had advanced cancer of the lymph nodes. All standard treatments had been exhausted, and Wright appeared to have little time left. His neck, armpits, chest, abdomen, and groin were filled with tumors the size of oranges, and his spleen and liver were so enlarged that 2 quarts of milky fluid had to be drained out of his chest every day. But Wright did not want to die. He had heard about an exciting new drug called carbimazine, and he begged his doctor to let him try it. At first, his doctor refused because the drug was only being tried on people with a life expectancy of at least 3 months. But Wright was so unrelenting in his entreaties, his doctor finally gave in. He gave Wright an injection of carbimazine on Friday, but in his heart of hearts, he did not expect Wright to last the weekend. Then the doctor went home. To his surprise, on the following Monday, he found Wright out of bed and walking around. Kloffer reported that his tumors had, quote, melted like snowballs on a hot stove and were half their original size. This was a far more rapid decrease in size than even the strongest X-ray treatments could have accomplished. 10 days later, 10 days after Wright's first carbimazine treatment, he left the hospital and was, as far as his doctors could tell, cancer-free. When he had entered the hospital, he had needed an oxygen mask to breathe, but when he left, he was well enough to fly his own plane at 12,000 feet with no discomfort. Wright remained well for about 2 months, but then articles began to appear asserting that carbimazine actually had no effect on cancer of the lymph nodes. Wright, who was rigidly logical and scientific in his thinking, became very depressed, suffered a relapse, and was readmitted to the hospital. This time, his physician decided to try an experiment. He told Wright that carbimazine was every bit as effective as it had seemed, but that some of the initial supplies of the drug had deteriorated during shipping. He explained, however, that he had a new, highly concentrated version of the drug and could treat Wright with this. Of course, the physician did not have a new version of the drug and intended to inject Wright with plain water. To create the proper atmosphere, he even went through an elaborate procedure before injecting Wright with the placebo. Again, the results were dramatic. Tumor masses melted, chest fluid vanished, and Wright was quickly back on his feet and feeling great. He remained symptom-free for another 2 months. But then the American Medical Association announced that a nationwide study of carbimazine had found the drug worthless in the treatment of cancer. This time, Wright's faith was completely shattered. His cancer blossomed anew, and he died 2 days later. Now, the second information that I'm going to share comes from this book entitled Interpretation of Scripture by Neville Goddard. Now, I've mentioned this before, but for those of you who are new to my channel, Neville Goddard was a Barbadian-born mystic. When he was a young man, he moved to the U.S., and he performed as a dancer for a few years, but later held lectures between the 1930s and the early 1970s about our true self, which he affirmed was consciousness and deliberate creation. And I'm hoping that the quotes that I share from this book will help you in your understanding of how the mind could create the effects that we desire. The first quote comes from page 15. Here it is. Things have no reality other than in consciousness. Therefore, get the consciousness first, and the thing is compelled to appear. Now, I know that can seem very strange. Things having no reality other than in consciousness. This is definitely not the way that we've been conditioned to interact with our apparent reality. But if we turn to the example of our nighttime dreams, we realize that all of the persons, all of the events, and the circumstances within a dream only have reality in consciousness. And that's what I'm suggesting is taking place here too, in our waking state reality. Here are two quotes from page 20. Man's world, in its every detail, is his consciousness out-pictured. The second, your environment and all within it reflects that which you are in consciousness. This is why it's so important to know what we're assuming in consciousness. It also relates to a quote from the Bible, which states, "As he thinketh in his heart, so is he or she." in your essence? What are your assumptions in your essence? The account about Mr. Wright certainly pointed to that. At first, his assumptions were hopeful. And then as he was inundated by news through the media, he became less hopeful, and the effect turned to the nocebo effect, to harm. The next quote is from page 22. Nothing comes from without. All things come from within, from the subconscious. Again, when we turn to the analogy of a dream state dream, all events, all circumstances are only due to consciousness. Next quote is from two quotes, actually from page 31. Your life expresses one thing, and one thing only: your state of consciousness. And the second, as you, through the medium of imagination, assume a state of consciousness, that state begins to clothe itself in form. It solidifies around you as the serpent's skin ossifies around it. But you must be faithful to the state. Now, regarding that, I'd like to share that the harder we press from something from the perspective of the person, it can often work against us. We're best to employ the mind in the way that we would like, employ awareness in the way that we would like, by gentle assumption. Force does not work. When we go into a meditation or before we're drifting off to sleep at night, if we can gently imagine a scene that implies that we already have what we desire, the gentle way is the best way. Repeat it until we begin to feel the reality of that. Next quote is from page 53. All that is asked of you is to accept your desire. If you dare claim it, you will express it. He means from consciousness it will be expressed, not as you, the body-mind person, doing it. And the last quote that I'm going to share from this book today comes from page 80. Not only are all things made of God, all things are made by God, all things are made of God. All are the offspring of God. God is one. Things or divisions are the projections of the one. I'm going to read that again. Not only are all things made by God, all things are made of God. All are the offspring of God. God is one. Things or divisions are the projections of the one. The one, or God, would be consciousness. In this case, it would be opposite to the way we've been conditioned to believe. We've been conditioned to believe that consciousness arises out of processes within the brain. With this, consciousness or awareness, spirit, God, is the substratum of everything. Everything, including our body-mind person, arises within it on the screen of consciousness. I hope this has given you something worthwhile to contemplate today. If you've liked this video or found it useful or helpful, I invite you to share, subscribe, and like. More information is found through my free articles at thinktwice.me and also through my book entitled This Taste of Flesh and Bones, available from Amazon. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to seeing all of you again very soon. Bye for now.